Relationships are the cornerstone of Constantia success. They offer value collaboration and take great pride in creating and unlocking value for their partners and for each other, always with a personal touch. Today I'm speaking to Lebogang Padi, Executive for Governance and Compliance, about what we can expect on the regulatory front in 2022. Thanks for joining me, Lebo. First of all, the insurance industry is becoming increasingly regulated. In your opinion, are we not becoming completely over-regulated, or is it necessary?
Thank you, Rhianette. Thank you, and thanks for the lovely question. I guess on the face of it, you could say that we're being overly regulated. But I must say that, it's been a journey, right? And again, it's also been a bit of a long time coming. And I know that change is difficult, change is painful, but it's really just been what has been on the cards for quite some time. If you've been long in the industry itself, you'd actually understand some of the changes are pretty much not new, right? I mean, they're coming a bit thick and fast, but certainly not new. But I also don't think we're being overly regulated. As I said, on the face of it, you may think so. There's a reason behind that. And I think you have to understand the legacy issues. If you understand the legacy issues that has really happened in the industry, with industry participants probably not being very client-centric, right, and client-focused, then you can actually just understand why the change or the need for change, I think there was certainly a need for change, certainly a need to change the thinking of the industry players, right, of the insurance industry players, including brokers, and how we change the mindset, right, and ultimately making sure that mental switch, it's just a mental switch to make sure that, at the core, there is a client, right, and whether it's a corporate client, whether it's a retail client, there is a client. And I think for me, that's really just, what has expedited the need, for the change by the regulators, right? And some of them, not so good conduct that, industry participants have been known to actually just behave, and conduct. So, and we've seen, whether it's, on newspaper articles, whatever, we've seen some of the behaviors that have really just not been good. Again, legacy issues. No. And that's really just had to push forward, how we think about, the products that we put out there, the marketing of those products, right? The policy wordings, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And that's really just had to have a paradigm shift on all players within the industry. So yes, there's over-regulation on the face of it, but I think there's a good cause of why we are where we are today.
Do you think treating customers fairly has become more serious since the regulation has been enforced on treating customers fairly? Or do we still see that they are treating customers not being treated fairly?
I think treating customers fairly, it started with principles. We had TCF principles, and we could, regurgitate them from 1 to 6, and, we could really say what that was. And so those principles have really been entrenched in our legislation, right? So it's not a longer, it's a nice to do, when I have time, if I've got capacity to do it, I'll do it. It's really just entrenched, right? From how your business, from its governance structures, right, to how, when the client comes in and actually lodges some dissatisfaction, right? So it's really fully entrenched in how we, in all the, processes that we deal with, right, within, our policy protection, rules, the PPRs, for example, policyholder protection rules. That's really entrenched the TCF principles. So it's no longer nice to have. It's no longer, let's see if we've got a budget for this. It's mandatory. It's a must have. Yeah. So it's important that, we understand that it's no longer it's something somewhere out there that is very philosophical, right? Yeah. It's really just, it's very critical. Tangible, and very critical to our policyholders and our clients.
What do you see or experience intermediaries battling with the most when it comes to interpreting and understanding regulations?
Rionette, I think it's quite an interesting thing, and I think the challenges are across the board, right? Whether you're an intermediary, whether because we're all going through the changes together, right? We're all going through it. We're insurers, intermediaries are also going through what we're going through. We, for example, we are, we're registered as an insurer and an intermediary, so those changes are applicable to us as well, and that's really a common cause for most insurers. And I think part of it is because a lot of it is probably coming through thick and fast, with intermediaries, and maybe there's a level of being overwhelmed, right? And most importantly, I think it's a case of maybe having to actually look at what I have as an intermediary. Do I have the capacity to be able to deal with all of this, right? Because compliance is expensive, right? And probably making sure that you've got the right skill set, right, as an intermediary, right, to have the right people that will be able to interpret the people that will understand what the changes mean and what the impact of those changes mean to the business, right? So I think that interpretation of proper gap analysis, right, proper impact analysis, and I guess all of that really just gets to be so convoluted that probably intermediaries are getting a bit flustered in all of these particular changes, right? And I mean, notwithstanding the fact that we've had COVID environments and so the whole remote working and so forth, right? So that has also expedited a bit of anxieties, right, that have been experienced. But I think it's what you have, and maybe also the anxieties of an intermediary to think that, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I interpreting it? Am I correct? Is this really the way I'm reading it, in a way that ought to be understood? And I think it's just not just intermediaries. It's literally everybody that's an industry participant, because there are no laws that are perfectly written. Okay, there are no regulations that are perfectly written, right? And it's again making sure that the interpretation is actually quite clear. But I don't want to be a prophet of doom, and really create a situation where it's really, so dull and so depressing, but it's to just assure intermediaries that we're all in it together, right? It's all of us in it together. And if there is some challenges or some uncertainty, there is help, right? And there is, the industry forums are there to be able to assist, the regulators are also there to be able to, so there is help. So I just want to make sure that they're not left in the lurch and being panic stricken.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly challenging for the smaller brokerage, one of those. And for me, the smaller brokerages have a very critical role to play. There's a specific client base that they are talking to. And I think for them specifically, it can be quite overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Looking ahead into 2022, what are the main regulations to keep an eye out for?
Renette, we have, I think, we spoke about TCF when we started, right? And I said it's entrenched in our regulations. And I sort of mentioned, the PPRs, right? The policyholder protection rules. So we've seen the draft changes from the regulators, right? So we have been provided opportunities to be able to respond, right? So that's going to be quite a big ticket item, to actually just look at those. So that's a big ticket item, really, essentially, because PPR is really the governing, quite a big ticket on the governing of the how to, sort of do conduct related issues with policyholders. We also have, there've been quite a number of published drafts, for example, but I think, the other thing that, we've been looking in anticipation, I guess, as insurers, is of course the coffee bill, right? The Conduct of Financial Institutions Bill. So that's something that we're looking forward to, or in anticipation of, right? And of course, I guess we're in a draft stage and we're hoping that it will get to a finality. But of course, that bill as well, really introduces a serious change, right? The responsibility of board members, for example, and they're really making sure that, for example, policies in the old days, you would draft a policy and it would not even come past your board agenda, for example, right? For approval, right? It was done with some senior manager that will sign off, and life goes on, right? And now you've got those critical components that, are also of treating customers fairly, that need to be presented to the board for sign-off and approval, right? So it's quite a number of those things that are really just interesting paradigm shifts, right? On how we do, that. So board members have a fiduciary responsibility, right? And now they need to make sure that, as they're sitting in boards, they actually understand, right, the nuances and the levers that are also just at the bottom end. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, those are just very big ticket items. And of course, there are other drafts that are coming through. But if I really look at what's probably on the horizon, I think those are just, one of the major two, issues around. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure there will be more to come.
Absolutely. I think certainly more that we're sort of dealing with, but yeah, if you're really looking at what's going to keep, intermediaries busy, what's going to keep insurers busy, we're really going to be kept busy for some time.
Okay. Any last comments or word of advice to the FA News readers who are intermediaries in a time where regulation and compliance is taking over a big chunk of their jobs? Your message to them for 2022?
I just want to say to the intermediaries and of course the readers, we are all in it together. You spoke about, the impact on small brokerages, right? And I think, we also need to make sure that, we also make use of our regulators. We pick up the phone, we seek clarity, where it needs to. And I know that generally probably intermediaries, right? And maybe even insurers are very wary of intermediary, of regulators. They just want to make sure that, you don't want to deal with those guys unnecessarily. But that's it's an enabling component, right? If you're stuck, if you probably have nowhere else to go, yes, you've got your compliance officers that you can actually tap into that knowledge, right? But you can also make use of the regulators. I think it's important that we begin to personify the regulator, and without necessarily treating them, as very a long distant memory, right? But begin to personify them, create relationships. You really know people that, who you can, contact, people with your industry bodies, for example, just make sure that you use those adequately because, there's a knowledge sharing, we all share the knowledge, right? And no man is an island. And I think for me, that's really the advice that, we're in it together. If there's a meeting of an industry that you can attend, please, by all means, right? Just hear what the other people are actually just, how other people are dealing with the challenges that you're dealing with, right? So you're not actually just stuck and actually being frustrated, with, some of these changes. So that's really my advice, a shout.
So Lebo, you touch on reaching out to the regulator, apologies. How easy, it's probably fairly easy for you as an insurer, but how easy is it for a broker to really reach out to the regulator? Where do they start?
First of all, as a broker, you pay levies, right? You're not operating as an unlicensed, brokerage, right? So you pay levies. You receive some sort of a correspondence from the regulators, right? An email of some sort, etc. Right? We've got the regulator's website, and you've got the contact details. They've got they've got a call center, a number that can actually just be reached, right? And I just think that it's really those avenues, right, where you can drop an email, right? We've got and of course we've got two regulators, but particularly with the conduct regulator, which is FSCA, you can pick up the phone and actually just say, listen, I'm struggling with, can you please refer me to someone, right? And I think for me, that's where you begin to form relationships, right? If, for example, Mary at the regulator helped you with one thing, keep the contact details of Mary, right? Keep the email address, right? And if Mary can't help you, just say, listen, you're my contact person, but maybe someone else that is a colleague, you can actually refer my complaint to. I have those challenges, for example, where I'm not winning on something else, right?
Okay.
And I'm able to sort of, literally break those walls. And I think it's just the fear that, you don't want to just learn to break the walls. And I had an incident just last week, and I was, quite surprisingly, it got sort of resolved. But the bottom line is that it's something that has also been going on for quite some time, So when I say that it's the struggle is the same. The struggle is the same. It's just to ensure and begin to understand that the regulator is not there in a punitive manner, where they, administer administrative penalties and then they leave. Once you begin to understand that they're also, here to help, even the small broker, the one-man show small broker, he's equally got the same right as an insurer when dealing with the regulator.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's quite a big struggle, but I think it's perseverance, and I think it's good advice. Try to build relationships, because that's what
try to build relationships. Try to make sure that if you've had one person, just one person, and your phone was answered by one person, right, and that person was able to help you, use that contact for them to be able to refer you to other people, right, within the structures that can help you. And it really helps. And I guess it's trying to push. I guess, in the old days, you would walk or drive through to the regulator and bench and sit outside and wait for someone. But now you've got a virtual, so that also brings in its own complexities. And I would be none the wiser not to say that. But I'm just saying that I think to build that relationship, and as you build up the rapport, you build up a contact list of the individuals that you've dealt with. So you would know, Mary assists me with, onboarding of reps, right? Someone else assists me with removing of, reps on the rep register, and so it goes, right? If I need to do a profile change, I need to speak to Peter. If I need to do this. So you then start building a bit of a contact list, right, of the individuals that can actually just help you in that space.
Yeah, no, that's some good advice. Thank you, Lebogang Padi. I appreciate your time, and I wish you a fantastic, blessed and healthy 2022. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Renette. And hopefully, the intermediaries and the brokers can actually just, take some advice as well. But when you're in doubt, ask. When you're in doubt, always ask.
That's a good advice. Thank you very much, Lebu.
Thank you. Cheers.